We always hear about how a mother's love can shape a child's mind, their personality, but what if it goes deeper than that? I mean, way deeper. What if a mother's care could actually leave a physical mark on her child's DNA, changing how their genes work for the rest of their lives? Well, today we're going to unpack an absolutely groundbreaking study that chased that very question.
So, to get our heads around this, it all starts with a pretty simple observation. Scientists noticed that even when rats were genetically almost identical, they'd grow up to have two totally different personalities. You've got your calm, brave rat on one side. This one's curious, it explores new places, and its body is just not pumping out a lot of stress hormones. And then on the other side, you've got the anxious rat. It's fearful, it hides, and it is just swimming in stress hormones.
So that leads to this huge, classic question, the one we've been asking for centuries: nature or nurture? Were these rats just born this way, fated by their genes, or did something make them this way?
Well, the very first clue in solving this whole puzzle, as it turns out, was hiding in plain sight. It all came down to their mothers and what was happening in those first crucial days of life. See, what the researchers started noticing was that rat moms have very different parenting styles. The big one they focused on was something called licking and grooming, or just LG for short. You have your high LG moms who are super attentive, always licking, grooming, and nursing their pups. Then you have your low LG moms who are just a lot less attentive.
And here is where it gets really interesting. A pup's personality seemed to be directly tied to its mom's behavior. The pups raised by those super attentive, high LG mothers, they grew up to be the calm, brave adults. And the pups from the less attentive, low LG mothers, you guessed it, they grew up to be the anxious ones.
Okay, so that's a really interesting connection, right? But it doesn't quite crack the case. Maybe the calm mothers were just passing down calm genes and the anxious mothers were passing down anxious genes. Was it the genes or the parenting? To finally figure this out, they designed an absolutely brilliant experiment. They did what's called a cross-fostering experiment. Here's how it worked. They took pups that were just born to an anxious, low ILG mother, and they had them adopted at birth by a super nurturing, high ILG mother. So genetically, these pups came from an anxious line, but their entire upbringing was from a calm one. And the result? It was absolutely stunning. These pups grew up to be calm, brave adults. The takeaway here was just crystal clear. Nurture was winning out over nature. The way a pup was raised, the care it received, was what actually shaped its personality. It completely overrode the genetic hand it was dealt by its biological mom. So, okay, that's incredible. But it also opens up an even bigger mystery. How on earth does a behavior, a mother's touch, physically get under the skin to permanently change biology? What is the actual physical mechanism going on here? To answer that, the investigation had to go deeper. The trail leads from behavior right into the brain itself. The scientists started digging into the body's internal machinery for controlling stress. All right, so think of it like this. Your body has a built-in stress system. There's a stress alarm that goes off and floods your system with hormones. But just as important as the alarm is the off switch. In the brain, these off switches are called glucocorticoid receptors, or GR for short. And the more of these GR off switches you have, the faster and better you are at shutting down that stress alarm and just chilling out. And guess what they found when they looked inside the rats' brains? The calm rats were loaded with these GR off switches, lots of them. The anxious rats, on the other hand, had very few. This was the reason they were so anxious. Their alarm system basically had a faulty off switch that was always stuck in the on position. Okay, so that's the what. But what about the why? The number of these off switches is built by a specific gene, the GR gene. So the real question, the one that gets to the heart of it all, is what is controlling that gene? And this, my friends, is where we find the smoking gun. The answer isn't in the DNA code itself. Not a single letter of it was different. No, the answer was in a layer of chemical marks on top of the DNA, a layer that our life experiences can literally write on. Welcome to the world of epigenetics. So, what is epigenetics? It's basically how our environment and our experiences can leave chemical marks on our DNA. Now, these marks don't change the underlying code. The A's, T's, C's, and G's all stay the same. Instead, they act like a dimmer switch for a gene. They can turn its activity way up so it's shining brightly, or they can turn it way down so it's just barely on. Now, take a look at this. This is that dimmer switch for the GR gene in action. In the anxious rats, that gene was covered in these chemical marks, a process called methylation. This high methylation basically dimmed the switch way down. But in the calm rats, that same gene was clean. It was clear of marks, which allowed it to shine brightly and build lots and lots of those stress-off switches.
So the next question is, when does this epigenetic mark actually get made? The scientists tracked the pups from the moment they were born. On day 1, no difference at all. But then by day 6, right in the middle of that critical window of maternal care, a huge difference in these marks suddenly appears between the two groups. And that difference, it stays locked in for life. And just like that, the case is solved. The mother's licking and grooming, her physical touch, was literally sculpting her pup's epigenome. Her care was leaving a permanent biological fingerprint right on top of the DNA, a fingerprint that would control how her pup responded to stress for its entire life. But hold on, because the story does not end there. The researchers decided to ask one more absolutely audacious question, which led to one final stunning twist. Is this programming set in stone? Is a rat's fate really sealed in the first week of life? Are those anxious rats just doomed to a life of high stress because of the care they didn't get? Or could you rewrite the past?
So they tried something that sounds like science fiction. They gave the adult anxious rats a drug, one specifically designed to go in and erase those epigenetic methyl marks, to essentially wipe the slate clean on that GR gene. So this is the before picture. You can see when put under stress, the anxious rat's hormone levels just shoot through the roof. The calm rats, meanwhile, stay pretty level. That's the baseline, the result of that early life programming.
And now, look at this. After the drug treatment, the anxious rat's stress response was completely normal, indistinguishable from the calm rats. By erasing the epigenetic marks, the GR gene turned back on. Their brains built more off switches, and just like that, their past had been rewritten.
The original study ends with this absolutely mind-blowing sentence. We show that an epigenetic state of a gene can be established through behavioral programming, and it is potentially reversible. Think about that. This research didn't just solve a puzzle about rats. It fundamentally changed how we think about the nature-nurture debate. It showed us that our experiences can become biology, and it left us with the incredible, hopeful possibility that even the deepest marks of our past might not be permanent after all.